feel like I need to like clap or like we can all do like, I was doing reading week for my 8-year-old's class, and that was really, really tough to get everyone's attention. So look at you guys. Already, we're off to a great start. My name is Heather Thomson. Welcome to this Retail Vibrancy panel. I'm going to introduce our panelists here in a second, but I want to thank you for choosing this one. This one's definitely the best one out of the two, where we talked to Anand, so good choice. We're going to have a great conversation today about what the whole retail sector is looking like from a place of vibrancy, and I think a lot of people look at retail as this sort of linear part of the overall economic fabric, and it's so much bigger than that. So we're gonna have a big conversation about that. I also just want to say, for the point of this conversation, when we're referring to retail, we're talking about distribution retail, we're talking about restaurants, we're talking about anything that has some sort of interaction with a customer or a client. So just want to kind of put that little disclaimer out there. So I'm going to throw it over to Eric. You're going to do the first introduction. Love to know who you are, why you're here, what you do. And Eric doesn't think he needs a microphone, so let's see.
That was quite the trapdoor to walk into.
No,
you're not even in the back row. Back row, is this okay? I'm happy to use a mic if need be, but it always feels a bit more personal if we don't need it. My name is Eric Slatter. I got some thumbs up in the back. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. We're recording.
Oh, you're recording. No option.
All right.
But now you know you can do it.
Now the karaoke portion of the panel will commence. Endless love, please.
That's a duet, right?
For the next 40 minutes, Dave and I shall serenade you with. No. My name is Eric Slatter. I'm with Omada Commercial. We're a commercial real estate brokerage here in Edmonton. We've been around for about 8 years. I've been working in retail real estate for about 17 years. In my life before that, I was a sales rep for Burton Snowboards and all of their clothing and sub-brands, which is where I first met Justin at Foosh. He carried some of our clothing and backpack and shoes. And here we are now as proper grown-ups chatting about real estate. So at Omada, we're really lucky that we get to work on a lot of retail real estate. Our team and I do about 200 transactions a year, either in leases or sales of property. And each one of those little seeds year after year just forms part of the mosaic that is our fair city and shapes what a lot of streets and centers and properties and therefore Edmonton look like.
Okay, I'm Justin Durr. I own Foosh on White Ave and a couple of restaurants downtown called The Common, Foosh Repair Shop, 9910, and Double Dragon. We're about to open up our second location for Foosh on 104th Street. That's pretty much about it. Just kind of like doing fun stuff.
Cheers. Thanks, man. I'm Dave Hennessy. I work with Beljan Developments. We are a smaller local boutique developer. We do a lot of our work in and around Edmonton's main streets, so we're pretty heavily exposed to 124th Street, to White Avenue, to downtown. We love the city. We love trying to find cool old buildings and bring them back to life, and we get to work with cool groups like Justin and Eric as well on finding tenants for those spaces and the retailers to operate out of. So I'm the resident greedy landlord today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I think one of my favorite questions to kick off any sort of panel with is that I would love to know what is some really good news in your world right now. Like, let's start this off on a bit of a high note, but I also want to know, what is something that you're stressed out about? What is something that you're like, this is not going well, we need to pay attention to this? And in no particular order.
I don't have a mic, so.
Just take the
Good news for me is probably opening up my second location for Foosh. Foosh on White Ave has been around for 25 years, and it's been a staple on White Ave for forever. So having my another clothing store come downtown, I think it'll be awesome. It'll be great. It's good for the area, good for downtown. So I'm really excited for that. What stresses me out is the permits. It's taken forever.
What I'm excited about is we're a transaction-based business. So when transactions happen, it's good. When transactions are slower, it's not good. For anything retail related, obviously in 2020, that was a pretty precarious time. I'd say 2024 definitely started on a slower footing, but it seems like we're on track to have a really exciting fall. And by we, I mean the city of Edmonton and downtown and 124th Street. And there's been some really exciting things that are kind of percolating, which should all kind of come to fruition in December. And I'm hoping we get to head into the holiday season with some really exciting announcements of great key properties that are changing hands, new visions, new ideas, new investments. And we're going to kind of have a bit of a good news story coming out of it. I have 3 young kids. I exist in a business that's just a perpetual doom cycle of like project to project over and over and over again. So I'm constantly stressed and excited about everything all at the same time.
For me, we're coming through a pretty busy construction season, so we're seeing a handful of developments come online here, which is always a really exciting time. It's very stressful. Permits, always a huge issue, trying to get your final occupancy inspections, making sure your tenants have what they need to be able to get their doors open. That seems to be just a constant battle. As far as stress, it's as I mentioned, we're really heavily exposed to White Ave, 124th Street. Great to hear that there's new groups coming out. We've been a little disappointed to see the consumer activity in and around those spaces. We've seen, I would say, a pretty significant year-over-year reduction in retail sales and just general activity in that world. So excited to chat with a great retailer and a broker who are intimately aware of kind of all those ups and downs in this space. And looking forward to a good chat.
Yeah, I think the reason why I wanted to ask I actually didn't introduce myself. I'm really sorry. I'm Heather. I work at the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. So I'm gonna weigh in here on the good news, bad news. I also used to work at the University of Alberta. I used to run the Centre for Cities and Communities. So it's really nice to be back here in this space. One of the things is, as you guys were all kind of mentioning these different elements that are taking place, I think some of like the good news is that there's so much activity that seems to be happening, and Edmonton still seems to be such a strong market for business to take place and especially retail to really show up and take chances. I think one of the harder parts is that we don't have a lot of older space that is readily available for what retail needs today. And I think that's something that we're going to talk about what investment needs to take place in order for us to make sure that some of those older markets that have a lot of retail space are actually ready for the retailers, because we're seeing a ton of activity more in the newer suburban markets, but we're missing a lot of activity in some of those main streets, some of those older neighborhoods. Which leads me to my next question. I'm curious to know your take on how do we do that? So like we have, and Eric, I'm going to get you to kick this off, because we have a lot of vacancy here. I'll use the downtown core as an example. We did a retail study last year, and it was about a third of the space was vacant here in the downtown core for retail bays, but the majority of those spaces were vacant because they're not ready for retailers. And so if people said, oh, great, a third is available, I can't wait, I'm gonna go pick out my space, so much of it is not available. It's either too big, it's not correct. So curious to know your take on why are the suburban markets like ready to go, and why are they seeming to have such a faster pace of selling out space versus the older neighborhoods? Right, sorry.
Yeah. We have to use the microphone, Heather. Despite our best efforts. Yeah, I mean, we could bore everyone with the whole panel of talking about the statistical data of retail vacancies and where we were pre-COVID, and it is really the tale of two cities of what was happening in the core and what was happening in, your conventional grocery-anchored suburban market. And if you look at those markets outside of downtown, like retail is insanely strong. Like their vacancy would be probably sub 2%, Dave, maybe. So if you look at that compared to the office story, even compared to the industrial story, and you guys would even experience that. You're driving around on the weekend doing whatever you want to do as a consumer and a human in the big city. Like you're not seeing really anything for vacancy in those stores. From an investment in a real estate perspective, part of that is the rates have remained almost immovable for a decade. They have not changed in the base rent. What has changed, and Justin experiences this and Dave experiences this on the landlord side, is the property taxes. Those have crept up, and unlike an apartment lease or a residential lease, those are downloaded and separated and charged to the tenant. And we have shopping centers where the operating cost used to be $13, $14 a square foot. They're now $24, $25, $26 a square foot. So a landlord like Dave owning a building saying, geez, I can't get my rents to go up, my mortgage is going up, my every expense is going up, but the rates aren't moving. And then a tenant like Justin says, yeah, but I'm paying $10 extra just for insurance, just for taxes, just for utilities. And I don't care if it's going to net rent to the landlord or to those expenses. It's the same monthly cost for my business. And so it has created this this pinch point that we're not seeing the same amount of new development in those no suburban communities coming online as quickly. Downtown, on the other hand, different story. You know, if we close our eyes really tightly and remember 2019, like we had some swagger about us. Like downtown was moving. We had a great story to tell when we traveled to other markets in Canada. Like Edmonton was becoming not a top 3, but a top 5 key player for real estate and cool businesses to look at. And COVID wiped so much of that out. And now we have to separate, okay, what's a COVID issue that every other Western Canadian or American city is dealing with of around 1 million people? And then what's a unique problem to Edmonton that pre-existed before? And I'll stop talking after saying the problem with the downtown vacancy is if you did that survey year over year, every year since 2019, every month, every corner, it's not like we're moving that, oh, this space is filled and then this tenant moved in and then this moved. It's the same main floor spaces that are not functional, not desirable for sometimes a non-financial reason. Often the big mean landlords of the room, for some reason, they're just not leasing them. And so when you look at that, it's just showing no absorption or change in the market. It's just the same vacancies for 5 years. And unless we do something different, those same vacancies will be here 5 years from now.
I appreciate that context, and I think that's something that from a consumer's perspective, it doesn't matter. Like they don't care that it's a big bad mean developer like Dave that's not leasing out the space. It's optically it seems vacant. Justin, I'm so curious to get your perspective on this because as an actual retailer, you're on the other side of this conversation and I want to know, what is that like for you?
You just got to go into it knowing that things are going to cost a lot more, you know. So with that being said, yeah, coming from a entrepreneur side of things, I feel like you just gotta kind of make sure you have all your numbers all sorted out before you go into it. Make sure your landlord or the person that you're working with, they understand what type of business you're going into and what your max budget is. Because I feel like your landlord is also part of your business. So if you can have that partnership with your landlord, I feel like that's how you succeed. And you also gotta it's hard because if you're a young entrepreneur and you want to open up a retail shop or a restaurant or whatever, a lot of these places won't give you the time of day unless if you have, experience in it. So there are a lot of younger people coming up that want to do cool stuff, but they just don't have the means. So if there's, more help from the landlords or even from the city or whatever, I think to create a good, vibrant downtown, you need these young entrepreneurs to come in and, just kind of give it a try and hopefully,
take a shot.
Just exactly, take a shot kind of thing.
So to put you on the spot for one sec, curious to know, because you've worked with, I'm sure, so many different landlords and different, retailers. I'm curious to know, what would you say is kind of a non-negotiable now that you've had so many successful retail spaces? What does that partnership look like in terms of that landlord retailer? What are some of those non-negotiables in terms of what you need from them to be successful?
Well, for me, it's all about the base rent. If they want an obscene amount of money and I come back and I'm like, nope, I can't pay that. This is what I can do. And they're like, nope, then see you later, I'll walk kind of thing. And also having a good lease really helps, if something breaks, the landlord is there to help you, get through it. If your HVAC doesn't work or, your water tank busts or something like that, it's, again, for me, it's a partnership. For my White Ave store, Sal's has been my landlord for 25 years and he's been amazing. So, yeah, like he's helped us when COVID hit. He gave us 6 months free rent. He knocked it down. The air conditioning breaks in the summertime. He has somebody up on the roof fixing it in like 3 hours. Like just like stuff like that. Again, like a partnership, not just like a landlord.
Yeah. Dave, curious to get your perspective on that, and also kind of piggybacking on that. How likely is it that somebody will have a landlord that is a partner in that space?
Yeah, like the thing with property owners in a city like Edmonton, like we're not a huge. There's a lot of institutional money here. Like there's a lot of institutional ownership of commercial property, a lot of the suburban development, for example. But what I've found over time is a lot of the kind of nodes that we're talking about, like urban dense areas. It's kind of like property to property. Like sometimes you get a group like us who I feel like we're really integrated into the community, and we truly do see all of our tenant relationships as partners. Like I know at the risk of oversimplifying the business, like the only way that a tenant can afford rent is if they're making money. And so we try to do everything we can to get out of the way and allow their business to succeed. And there's kind of a trust that they know how to run their stuff better. And our responsibility is we create a canvas and then we try to operate it efficiently and ultimately just stay out of our tenants' ways. With like the broad category of landlords, however, you run into like, you might, right next to one of our properties is a 50-year-old son of a family who's owned this one building for 40 years and they've never reinvested into it, and they've kind of got an attitude of like, well, if you want to be here, you got to do A, B, and C for me type thing. Like it just property ownership is so different to everybody else. I think back to like, I think the original question, Heather, is like, how are we finding these pockets of retail and converting them and making them more useful to the tenant base? Like on the service side of the equation, we focus a lot on like, how can we do this better? How can we deliver a more efficient product? For us, like our whole mandate is we take under-positioned building that was maybe built 40, 50, 60 years ago. We have to put a pro forma together where we say, okay, it's worth X dollars today. We're going to invest $2 million into it to try to make it more functional. And at the end of it, we think we can generate such and such number of rent. And like, that's really how the game works. And we have to go to the bank and we have to convince them that that's going to work. We have to go to investors and we convince them that's going to work. And so kind of back to the base rent and gross rent conversation, like our ability to continue to do this work in these markets and buildings is really dependent on tenants being able to find a profitable way to operate. But it's been a tough like last 24 months here. Is like interest rates have gone up, so our mortgages are all more expensive. Construction pricing has just been crazy. It's been so volatile. It's impossible to predict accurately what your next project is going to be based on your last one. So it's been a really like boo-hoo for the landlords, but it's been a really tough world to operate in. And ultimately, like like I said, we rely on retailers like Justin at the end of the day to find the abilities for profit and efficient business. What I've got a bit of a different outlook on the city. I think there's been a pretty big impact to the consumer demand base in a lot of these spaces, and so we can provide the cool space and work with cool tenants, but at the end of the day, the customer's got to be there to support it. And if it's not, we're going to lose the business. Like we'll lose the tenants, we'll lose the cool operators, and then that affects groups like us and our ability to continue to reinvest and redevelop a lot of these sites. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's...
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you here in a sec. Because one of the things that we were looking at, like what is the silver bullet for Main Street retail to be successful? And it's density. Like this is actually not even a debate anymore. This is just, that's the one answer. Mm-hmm. And like, so for example, with, downtown Edmonton, there's about 12,000 people living downtown. Maybe we need 25,000 people living downtown. And if we look at the Oilers run, we had 41,000 people downtown. And the vibrancy, I think, week over week, year over year, we're looking at 400% increases in sales for a lot of restaurants and businesses within like that 6-block radius around Rogers. I think the interesting thing is that we have to figure out, yes, we have to work on density, and that's something that I think all different levels of government need to come to the table to kind of start that incentive program. Be curious to know, and I'd love to hear from all of you, what do you think, if removing density out of the, like taking that off the table, what would you like to see as like the main investment for getting that sort of critical consumer demand back for Main Street retail that's moving out of the suburban markets, like you said, that are doing so well?
From government or or private?
I'm going to come to the private here in a second,
Sure.
but like from government, let's just say for fun, government's like, yeah, let's dive into this. Let's spend money.
Yeah,
They're not, but let's say they could.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think government very much we appreciate our relationship with the city. I think as far as Canadian municipalities go, I think Edmonton's actually one of the better ones for like permit applications, but it's still so difficult for a lot of these groups to get through. Like Justin runs six concepts, 5 concepts. What's your count on? Who knows? Yeah, multiple concepts. He's done this multiple times, and like the stories he'll tell you about how difficult it is just to manage like a simple change of use from a pre-existing built space to a different concept with no major mechanical or electrical impacts. Like the challenge that these guys go through is incredible. But I think the question is like from an investment perspective, like how can cities accommodate kind of this support of cool independent local business in the urban center? I think one is figure out how to help these guys get open and get out of the way. Number 2 is Edmonton. It's no surprise here to anybody here, but we developed in a way where it's very spread out. Our density is quite low as compared to a lot of other North American major cities. So in the absence of density, if we want this development to occur in our urban core, you need to find ways to collect people and get them in. Like, it's just at the end of the day, everybody relies on people just walking through the door and spending money. So improve transit, find ways to be safer, cleaner transit, invest into the public space, create clean, safe, comfortable infrastructure that people want to hang out in. White Ave's White Ave. Like we all know it. It's been around forever. It kind of goes ups and downs, and poverty and everything, of course, has a big factor in it. But it's like the biggest thing that we continue to hear feedback from the public is like, it's hard to get to. I gotta park and then I gotta walk.
Parking.
I gotta walk 10 blocks and like it's noisy. I got the buses all driving past me. Like, it's just not a super comfortable place. And I think I believe that the best thing for retail is like, again, just get out of the way. Let these guys do what they're good at, is make money and open up cool concepts. And then from the public sphere is like, let's try to create easy, accessible ways for people to get there and spend their money. Yeah,
I guess same sort of question over to you, Justin. Like, what from a government standpoint would you love to see? Like, we're going to take permits off the table, because I think we can all agree that for sure, if we could just do that really quickly, that would be awesome. But like, what would you like to see happen from an investment standpoint that would make your business more profitable and easier to run?
Well, I would have to say having more independent restaurants, coffee shops, just have just more smaller businesses around. So if somebody comes to my store to shop, they can jump over to the next door and grab like a coffee or a drink or food. So kind of creating like a little community, and I feel like that's super important as well too, right? Like, hopefully with having, this clothing shop downtown, we're like an anchor where more retail, more shopping can come back downtown, which, right now, there's not a whole lot. It's pretty lacking in clothing shops downtown. I think there's us in the Helm and maybe a handful more, but you just got to kind of create these little small communities where people feel comfortable to come down to, shop around, have coffee, have an ice cream, in the evening, have a drink, whatever. I just feel like just little communities, just like what these suburban things are doing, but like bring it downtown.
Eric, same question.
Sorry, what's the same question?
Like Eric wasn't listening.
No, I was.
I'm
We
just
just it's a living conversation.
What do you want
it's
government
moving.
to spend money on? What would make a difference for retailers to make more money and for the retail sector to be more successful outside of the suburban markets?
My hot take on it would be a line I'll steal from a well-known developer who's built a lot of stuff downtown Edmonton, and this was a line that they had told me before COVID. But it's just, if we're sitting around waiting for the government to fix things, we're all fucked. If you're running a landlord or development business, if you're running restaurants or retail stores, if you're running a professional services business and you're waiting every day for whatever level of government to come in and save you, like that's it, game over. And through COVID, I think so much of that changed because a lot of businesses were just thrown into this completely unknown situation and the government had to be there, otherwise who knows where we would be. And now as we get out of it, we have to get back to that place where it shouldn't be incumbent on any level of government to save any of us. And you could bang your head against the wall forever to try to do that. And there's great advocates who do that, both directly for the government and indirectly. But I find it's most important for us if we focus on what's in our lane, what can you control, what can you count on your neighbors, the person who owns the business, the restaurant, the property next to you. If we got every city building conference from every major market in our country together, every one of them would have a panel and complain that their council is the worst, and their planning and development process is the worst, and the permit one is the worst. We would all complain about that. And then if the market was red hot, we'd put all that aside and we'd complain about whose construction costs were the worst. And that will never go away. And I think Dave's comment is true. What we can lose sight of for all the imperfections and for how ridiculous it can be for a guy like Justin just to try to build a washroom in a space, Edmonton is pretty darn good. And I think if there's a competitive advantage we're missing, it's that on the industrial sector, you guys have probably seen this in the news, we're losing so many industrial businesses and now so many single family residents to Leduc and Beaumont and Stoney and Spruce because they're just saying, hey, you needed a permit, it'll take you 6 months in Edmonton. Well, like Doug down the hall signs it. Like, we'll take him for lunch at Tony Roma's, he'll stamp it right there. And oh, your taxes there are $6 a foot, they're $3 a foot here. Edmonton has that same advantage competing against the other 4 top 5 markets. We're better than Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. We're better. So the story is the same way that those communities around us are eating our lunch. We have that ability to compete on the national scale against the 4 other major markets. So you want to build a tower here, you want to bring your store here, you want to bring the restaurant here. We're better than those other guys, and we could do it more efficiently. If we just had a gift card for municipal services that we could apply it to, I would just want to see the basics. Just let's keep it clean, let's keep it safe. Everybody, regardless of your situation in life, deserves to get a helping hand. But sometimes the guy or gal who owns the business has rights. When Justin's staff is leaving at 2 or 3 in the morning, whenever you guys are done cash out, they have rights to feel safe, secured, and get from their place of business to their car. My conveyance officer and my staff, they should also have a right that they can go to the bank downtown in the middle of the day and be able to conduct banking needs without me having to feel like, am I putting my staff in an unsafe situation by asking them to walk to the bank, wait in line for 45 minutes, and do what we need to do in a banking service? And sadly, there's been situations where I have had to just say, like, this is just not safe. I cannot ask somebody on my team to go do this because I think it's an unreasonable risk to bear. And so I think maybe the pendulum has to swing back a little bit, that, the line of downtown is for everybody. That means everybody. So everybody should get to feel safe and be able to do what they got to do downtown.
So my first meeting with Eric we were actually on a panel. This was before COVID. And we had a disagreement. Do you remember that?
You were 8 months pregnant, so I think I just let you win,
Yeah.
but I don't remember what
But
the disagreement was.
We had a disagreement. So it's interesting because I was 100% right, as I am now. But so part about the government, because I agree with you, like, if we're waiting for government to, then you, as you so eloquently said, we're all fucked. But I think the reason why I want to kind of pin on this conversation is that I think with Edmonton being so geographically large of a downtown community, as an example, we're seeing so many other markets where different levels of government are investing in the downtown. And we're seeing them kind of like City of Calgary is a great example, where they have $150 million in 2018 that went towards development incentives to turn office space into residential conversions. And so Dave, you were talking about how expensive it is with interest cost construction and just how long it's taking. I'm curious to know, we have a problem, right? We have a housing crisis. We have too much office space. We have too much retail space that isn't fit for today. Curious to know who has to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? Should the burden be on the consumer? Should the burden be on the retailer? Should the burden be on the developer? Should government intervene and make this a competitive market again? Like, we haven't had a residential permit, correct me if I'm wrong, pulled in the downtown core since January of 2021.
For a high rise.
For a high rise.
That's
Sorry,
correct.
Yeah, good distinction. But I'm curious to know, like, who should pay for it?
I think in that conversation, the only reasonable expectation you should have from any business or government entity or anyone is you can't ask anything of them other than to do what's in their best interest. And that goes down to the consumer. Like, if it's not in your best interest to come downtown to go to a restaurant or a shop, then we can't ask you to do that and shop local or support the neighborhood or like deal with the parking. It doesn't work. You can only ask of somebody to do what's in their best interest. I think what's maybe lacking is that in the absence of our previous market conditions, the city and other certain groups need to realize it is in their best interest to support downtown. And Calgary is ahead of us because they were already at this party in 2019. They had the highest vacancy rate of office space ever tracked in the world. No office market had ever had a vacancy rate like Calgary had going into COVID. And so they were just 5 years ahead of the rest of the world of seeing how bad it gets when your office towers get empty. And now Edmonton and every other city is slowly getting to the party. Our downtown tax base used to account for 10% of the revenue the city could count on. I believe it's now down to 6.4. And so if Dave owned a $200 million office tower and the building just like his next to it just sold for $8 million, it's only a matter of time before those assessments start to go down and that revenue just starts disappearing. So I think the disconnect is that the city and other people have to realize it is in our best interest to invest in this because we're either going to pay for it a lot down the road or more directly now. I think the other thing, if we could rewind the clock to look at, is I think the running tab on Blatchford is now $320 million. So COVID or no COVID, if we could rewind the clock and say, hey, what if we put $320,000? Heck, split it. What if we put $150 into downtown and $150 into the corridors? You know, where could we be as a city now? And not to look to our neighbors down south, but you look at what Calgary's pulled off with the East Village. That was the plan. That's what you got to do. And, you know, for $320 million, like love or hate the state of Blatchford, just the bang for buck is not there. Sorry, I stole your microphone, guys.
Yeah, I've got I think this is a space that the city is actually doing a fairly good job in. We were the successful recipient of an affordable housing grant recently. I'm trying to think of how best to articulate this, but when we're looking at a project, like we look at a site and we say, okay, cool building, we think we could do something with it. The simple approach is like, what does it cost? How much do we think we have to put into it, and then what's it going to be worth at the end? And like if that doesn't pencil, like we've all got our own required rate of returns. If it doesn't pencil, I can't go to a bank, I can't go to an investor pool and say, hey guys, come work on this awesome project. We think it'll be great for the city, but you're going to lose 20% of your equity. Like it doesn't work. So that's like, if we're getting into the nuance of it, like that's really where government can step in. And so we've got a project downtown. It's the old YMCA Williams Hall. It's been just on the precipice of moving forward for years now. And finally getting that final grant allows it kind of cuts into your construction costs. Like if you buy it at X, if you got to spend $15 million on this and you get a $4 million grant, then your net cost is only 11, and you're like, oh shoot, that pencils actually. So that's a space where I think from a city perspective, they're going to be able to incentivize development. The vacant office program converting into multifamily is the Calgary program is I think strong, although I've heard that they've awarded some projects that haven't actually moved forward, which has its own problems. But I think finding ways to, you find those categories of B and C buildings that don't really function in today's market, and just like, okay, you don't want to knock it down because that doesn't make sense. But what can we do to this to make it more marketable? And sometimes that is where a city comes in, and then the net benefit for the city and us as taxpayers is that the property tax value of that property all of a sudden starts cash flowing again and going into the city, ends up being a net positive on the city's investment. So that's how I see that.
like Justin, to get the retailers' take on this in terms of like when I say like who should pay for getting the spaces fit so you can be successful, like curious to know your 2 cents on that. I doubt you're going to say the retailer, but maybe.
Well, it would be nice if it was shared between us and the landlord, but that's not the case, right? So yeah, like I think you just got to go into the project knowing that you are going to be spending this money, and you just got to be smart about it. And then, you know, maybe the landlord will come, well, they do help you out, you know, with, you know, free rent or what have you. But I think at the end of the day, yeah, like you just got to know that you're going to go in, you're pretty much paying for everything.
I think that's what's interesting. I know there's a lot of different methods of what retail is looking like. When we did our study last year, we saw lots of like retail as an amenity where if a building had a certain amount of floors, they made the bottom space. And I still don't know if this is happening all the time, but they made that space free for people to offer some sort of retail or like food and beverage more so. And I think that, you know, this whole conversation really is about retail vibrancy and that whole social umbrella of what's happening when retailers are successful and consumers feel supported. And I think from a consumer's perspective, post-COVID, we have a lot as a consumer to be thankful for because the world's so competitive. So we have a lot of choice. And I think what we're seeing that is successful is really around you either have to make it easy, you have to make it beautiful, or you have to make it exceptional. So final question for the panel. I'm curious to know what's working really well. So this isn't like necessarily a good news story, but like what are you seeing where you're like, they're nailing it, this is working well, excited to see where things are gonna go next?
Can I do both? The duet starts now. What is going really well? One example and then one thought. I have this awesome local business, retail focused. They're looking to come downtown. They need a small space, but it's got a tight budget. And I was like, oh, well, there's some great options, and landlords will roll out the red carpet for you. Like we've done through COVID, like we were doing deals with like 2 years of free rent. I went to a 5-year lease deal where the landlord paid the tenant $1,000 a month to operate the space. So I'm like, somebody's going to take this like great group. Not Dave. It was different. It was a worse building than Dave's building. And bad news, good news is we submitted 3 offers on 3 spaces, and every landlord came back. They're like, nah, I can't do it for one reason or another. All good reasons. But we were talking about it with the team in the office of like the market is moving. Like of all this vacant space and all this trouble, that those days are gone from a couple of years ago where just any tenant with a pulse and a good story would be accepted. And we will find a way for this business to go somewhere great, but that's an encouraging story. I think the larger thought of it is there is just real estate's really interesting because the 80s and the 90s were so bad, it created this huge generational delta between people who work in it. And so there's a lot of people who are 65, 70, 75, 80 years old in the real estate business. There's a huge age and experience gap of anyone literally, Dave, from like 50 to 70, like a 20-year gap. And through COVID over 5 years, a lot of those people are now starting to retire, and now the next grown-ups in the room are all people who are in kind of their 40s and 50s. And slowly but surely, the transformational impact of people who own these buildings, make these decisions, invest this capital, are responsible for these construction companies, is becoming like the kids who are all people who are fast forwarding 20 years. And you're starting to see it, that yes attitude of let's figure it up. Costs are up, construction is up, interest rates are up. Let's find a way to make it work. And let's remember that growth in Edmonton used to always be a good thing. And yes, housing is tough. Yes, it's getting more expensive. But growth used to be our secret sauce. YEG, young, educated, growing. Like we used to win on that. And I like to think that we're heading into 2025 that we're going to get back to that and remembering that a growing city is a good thing. And you got to find the ways to make it work for everybody involved. But we're starting to find the way that looks after the post-COVID hangover is starting to wrap up.
I think on a business standpoint, when it comes to good things, like for people to come down, I feel like if you have a good product, I think people will come. Like, you know, like some of our spaces are really, really nice and people like to, you know, Instagram it, social media, whatever. And, you know, having good food helps, good music, just a good ambiance. So I feel like, you know, just more young entrepreneurs with young ideas, nice spaces, good build outs, people will start coming.
I guess to call attention to maybe a development that we're working on. So Station Park is our kind of shipping container and micro retail development on White Avenue. I think a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of the concentration of costs that really flow down to the retailer, and the thread that we've kind of been able to find our way through was taking a 1,200 to a 1,500 square foot space at $30 to $45 a foot. Like your gross out of pocket at the end of the month for the retailer is like $5,000 to $6,000 a month. Like that's kind of where that floor was. We went micro retail, so we've small units. We found some efficiency in the construction type to the point where we're even like literally just like 160 square foot shipping containers. And where we found the niche for us so far, it's early days and there's still a long way to go. But where we found the ability is it's a lower overhead for the retailer to operate. So if you're a direct-to-consumer brand, if you've got a good Instagram customer base built in, and that's where a lot of your business comes from, we've added a step in between that. Like, okay, I'm making some money online. I'm looking at a storefront. Oh shit, it's going to cost me $150,000 to build out a store, $200,000 to build out a store, and then it's going to cost me $6-7 a month to carry it. It's a small format space, so it's cheaper to build, cheaper to operate, and we've allowed for a step for retailers who are like, they're ready to move out of the online only space, or maybe they've been in the market circuit and they're looking for something new. Like, we found an ability to give another option to folks who are looking to take that next step without signing a 10-year deal with a $200,000 investment package and all that kind of stuff. So we're having fun with that one. It's as I said, early days. We're going to come into the first winter, so we'll see how we do there. But it's been a fun one to learn and pivot and be agile with.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have time for one question, just one. So who it has to be so good. And the best part is, yay! I didn't have to call on anyone I know. Yes, please.
Kind of a question for Justin and Dave, although Heather and Eric, I'd like to hear the perspective too. From a community perspective, retail customers are great. They're walking around, they're going to stores, they're around. From a retailer perspective, tired of competing with doctors' offices for main floor, main street retail, would you support a municipal ban on ground floor, street-facing clinical spaces?
I feel like we have to have Justin speak to this first. I'm so curious to have your answer.
Like, what kind of doctor space?
That
Just-
one wasn't on the bingo card of questions.
I was going to say, you know the ones who wrap their windows, but I don't include Foosh in that, because the window wrap is amazing. Like those places that they wrap their windows.
So like a service provider, like a dentist, doctors, like medi-spas, like people that are not doing a distribution-based retail. Yeah.
I think where you're getting with that. We talk a lot when we're programming a site. We talk always about tenant mix and like how do we find a synergy that we've got multiple tenants operating next to each other and complementing each other and all that. I think the point you're getting at is that if you're doing a dentist office or a medical clinic and pharmacy and you've got those window wraps, it kind of like it takes away from that street front. I hear it. I see it. I think like an outright ban on it, I think it would just be generally a pretty difficult thing to do. I don't know if it's necessary either. I think there's ways that you can encourage those businesses who they offer a service to the community, whether we like it or not sometimes. They offer a service to the community. There's best practices in glass, glazing and design and natural light and all that. I will say from a developer and landlord perspective, I think the reason that they are as successful as they are is because they're a pretty secure tenancy. The failure rate of a dental clinic, for example, is less than 2%, whereas a restaurant is a lot higher. Like it's harder to operate. So I can see why, if you're a little bit more of a conservative developer or investor or landlord, and you've got the option between a dentist who's going to be boring, but they're going to pay their rent, and a restaurant that's going to be maybe awesome, maybe crap, and you don't know. I can see how that decision gets made. We really go into a development trying to think of like, A, can we make money? B, is this going to be a net addition for the community? And we try to find ways to work with really cool independent tenants to bring that cool creativeness. Sometimes we'll supplement with a medical clinic or a dental clinic. I don't want to say they're bad tenants by any means, but I think there's ways to do it well. I think I take your point. I would rather see a dental clinic than a vacancy. That's really ultimately where I'm at.
And honestly, they need to buy shoes and clothes as well too, right? So if you're getting your teeth done, come in and buy some Jordans. Let's go.
It's so interesting because
Got
I
that
think,
dentist money.
yeah, because we have this. I feel like when we think of a main street, or we think like post World War II, where we've got like restaurants, we've got retail, we've got the shoe store, we've got all that stuff. The interesting thing of how we're looking at like what is a fabric of like a successful like commerce area, it's daycare, it's the chiropractor, it's the pharmacist, it's the hair salon, it's the restaurant, it's the coffee shop, it's really everything. And I think Dave said it perfectly. It's like, yeah, what are we choosing between? Are we choosing a vacancy, or are we choosing a lawyer's office? But the interesting thing, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about like the silk screen wrapped windows, like there's a key distinction here around if you have a customer facing interaction, regardless of the business, it has to look amazing. It has to look flawless. You have to have your windows clean. We worked with so many businesses throughout the pandemic that were like, oh gosh, I just can't keep up with Amazon. I'm like, yeah, but your light bulbs are burnt out, right? So there's a lot to be said for like that entrepreneurial spirit of just doing what you can. And I think that's where we would actually not notice the differences between service-based and like traditional distribution retail. Anything to say?
Well, it all has to go together. And to Justin's point, the best part about those businesses is they can be a huge traffic driver. If Dave's developing a building, he gets a great, on paper, 4,000 square foot secure tenant. Let's say they have 4 doctors in there plus a pharmacy. That allows them to then take the chance on 1,000 square foot to do the cool restaurant, the cool coffee shop, having that security. And then that restaurant, Justin may well come along and say, geez, like, you know how many patients are going to be coming in and out of these doors every day? Bring in your parents, bring in your kids. You know, often people are going to that in groups, and who wouldn't want to grab a coffee before or after the appointment? So that can, you know, eat up 4,000 square feet of space, but it can provide the lifeblood to allow a really cool 1,000 square foot concept next to it. And anything's better than a vacancy, to Dave's point. Is it coming out of this COVID world downtown? Is anything's better than nothing? And I could think of a lot of things I'd want to get rid of before I came after the doctors.
The interesting thing, and we're going to end on this point, but I cannot get over how many child care spaces there are without a coffee shop right next to it. It's mind-blowing to me. Like, why are they not together? Like, why is Starbucks not getting on this?
We're doing a development in the Ritchie community right now, kind of East White Ave, and through Eric's office, actually, we're trying to finalize a deal with the daycare. And using them as an anchor, we've gotten a brewery, and we're talking to a coffee shop, and we're talking to a barber shop. And there's a lot of the folks who we'll talk about would be like, there was a group of women that we were talking to, and they're like, you know, we would we'd go to pick up our kids, but on Fridays we would go an hour early. We'd all hang out at the brewery, hang out, go pick the kids up and go. So that's kind of where these like synergies of these like less hip tenant types can really integrate and work, and then in fact attract those types of businesses that we want to work with and that we want to bring to a community, and that might not go there otherwise. So at the end of the day, it's people, it's traffic, it's density, it's activity, and that's really what allows for the cool brands like what Justin does to really exist.
And toddlers are hip. Toddlers are hip. Okay, I think we're over time, so I just want to thank our panelists so much for your time today.
Thank you.